Oh, hey, hope everybody's doing well on this, what day is it? Thursday. All right, let's see here. Checking the audio. Is our audio okay? Let me know. I think we're good here. Had a bit of clouds here, as you can see. The moisture has come up quite a bit here in this part of Texas, and we're getting some upper level energy working its way towards our area. And let me bring up the, let's see here, let me switch my video. There we go. Okay, I think we're all set here. So there you go. You can see we got a few showers across Texas. We're starting to get a little bit of this northerly flow working its way into the state. And most of the shower activity we have is along the leading edge of that northerly flow. We'll go and bring up the plots here. You can see along the Gulf Coast we've still got easterly component there. Leading edge of the cool intrusion is basically from about Lufkin to San Antonio out to the Big Bend area of Texas. So what's the big picture? Well, one good way to do that is to bring up the, let's see, go to mag.noaa or mag.noaa, and we can bring up the thickness plot, and we'll check that out very quickly. We'll look at 1,000 through 500 millibar thickness and get an idea of the thermal structure of the atmosphere right now. And we come up with this neat little map, and that tells us that the core of the polar air is way up in the Canadian Arctic, about where we would expect that. And the deepest, richest tropical air is over Mexico. Okay, well, that makes sense. It's the transition zone in between, though, that where we pay the most attention to. And the south edge of that transition zone defines the polar front. So it's going to be running roughly like that. Back edge is going to be running kind of like that. And looks like that connects into this system here. And there we go. So this is kind of like the link up of all the polar fronts around the globe, and you could probably follow that all the way around in little bits and pieces. In fact, maybe we should try doing that. Very strong front here across Ontario and Quebec, and you're getting another one of those outbreaks of polar air right there in the northeast U.S. Here in Texas, not a whole lot going on. Looks like a very weak frontogenesis area, and it's mostly driven by this high that is sinking southeastward, getting a little bit of a very slight increase in pressure back behind it, very light density surge. It looks like a little bit of a cutoff low over here in Arizona, so we're going to look for that on the charts right there. So we'll switch over to the surface chart. There's a northerly flow working into Texas, and back behind it, lower 60s for temperatures, and a little bit drier air back behind that. So they've had a little bit of upslope flow in West Texas, and we can see IFR ceilings there around Alpine and Guadalupe Peak. And as you get further into New Mexico, we see some unseasonably stormy weather. See that upslope flow, easterly flow across the mountains right there. That's normally associated with poor weather in that area. And then we get further back, and we're going to find the upper level cutoff low somewhere around Tucson to Ajo and down to Sonora. Elsewhere around the country very quick. Florida under a very stagnant pattern, just kind of a cool, mild pattern. Go to the north in the Midwest, and you can see the leading edge of that weak front moving into Kentucky and Tennessee. And that front becomes a little bit stronger up in the northeast U.S. Leading edge is going to be running kind of like this, and you can see the winds are a little bit stronger at Block Island and Long Island. And up to the north, cooler conditions there in Quebec. Fresh polar air on its way down. fact, we can kind of trace this all the way back to the source region. We find blustery 20s and around Hudson Bay. And then way up north, yeah, you can see some very cold weather up there. Okay, so we're just kind of like bouncing around and just kind of get an idea of the overall pattern. You're kind of seeing what a preliminary analysis looks like as we go through all these different charts. So let's see here. What do we got lined up next? I've got a lot of tabs open here. I'm trying to figure out. Yeah, here we go. Let me back this up. Okay, so I'm going to take this into the forecast right now, and I'll show you a few new developments that have come up. Let me get this centered so you can see it perfectly. Okay, so starting out with our forecast overnight, looking at the warm front moving into the Great Lakes area, the polar front region is going to be kind of like this, kind of like what I showed you just a minute ago. And we're watching this area here in Texas for upslope and a little bit of isentropic lift along that boundary. And then over the next, wow, the weekend is already here, November 5th. Okay. You can see that upslope flow continues in West Texas, and the relative humidity, which is this very dark color, showing very dark green here. So that's going to be a lot of clouds and IFR ceilings out in West Texas. If we were about 30 degrees colder, 40 degrees colder, there would be a winter storm in the I-10 corridor from San Antonio all the way up to Midland. This is a good setup for that area. However, we are running just a little bit warm. So let's see, towards the end of the weekend, we're going to see things kind of mild in the south central U.S. Upslope flow still affecting New Mexico right there. Not a whole lot going on, but watch what happens up here in the Pacific Northwest. You see this trough here? This is actually a thickness trough. This is kind of like an area of cold air in the lower or mid levels of the atmosphere. And you're going to see that kind of carve itself out right here. So we're out at 96 hours on Monday, and this is a new development that we've seen in the models just today. So there you go. There's a cold pool right there over the Dakotas, and that actually moves south down the plains. Now we've got 540 here over Kansas, and that works its way into Texas and Oklahoma. So this is a little bit of dynamic cooling going on. And I was looking earlier for what exactly is causing this, and I had a lot of difficulty finding upper level temperature charts. That stuff is really hard to find for some reason on the internet. Everybody kind of puts out the same groups of upper level packages, and they kind of skip over some of this important stuff. I'm going to keep looking for this stuff tomorrow, and hopefully we can cover some more of it then. But for the time being, this looks like a very strong cold pool working down towards Texas, and the core of it right there over Oklahoma. So that could be quite interesting here for Thursday of next week, Wednesday or Thursday. And it looks like it kind of holds on over the start of the weekend. And we've got just enough cold air associated with that to get this frontal system going. It starts out in Texas and in Arkansas and moves into the southeast U.S. So you see that right there. That's our new frontal system, assuming that pans out. And then gradually that makes its way up into the northeast U.S. right there. So is that real, or are we going to actually get that? I took a look at some of the other models. Here's the ECMWF. You can read off the forecast time right here. There's the forecast hour. So let me run this back. November 6th, you can kind of make out a little bit of a trough feature right there. 96 hours carries it into North Dakota, and then nothing. So ECMWF not going for that. In fact, it's bringing a little bit of warm air in the wake of that and setting up that warm front again up in Canada. The UK Met model. Okay, here's that trough on the 7th. Run that forward, UK Met. Yep, it's going for that cold blob. And it's bringing that south into the South Plains right there. So yeah, the UK Met going for a slightly different solution, and I had here's the CMC model, the Canadian global model. Got the setup for the 7th right here. Run that forward, 108 hours. Yeah, it's bringing that cold blob southward. So the ECMWF is the outlier on this particular scenario. So I guess we're going to have some interesting weather coming up here next week. That'll be kind of a cool thing for us to look at. And maybe we'll get a little bit of winter weather, possibly in the Oklahoma area, maybe Kansas, if that comes together. And then we'll take a quick look at the upper level patterns for next week. Let me set our frame back up here. There we go. Okay, patterns over the next week. Start out with a ridge across the western U.S. There's that little cutoff low we were talking about earlier. Then over the weekend, we get that trough trying to break down that long wave ridge right here. And this is the one that comes over the ridge and starts carving off a cutoff low. See that here? Here it goes. Out over Minnesota on the 8th. Then on Wednesday the 9th, sinking down into the Central Plains, and of course, that's a cold blob, which means you're going to have temperature gradients all the way around it. And because of that, we've got a jet stream segment all around that. And so all the usual rules and everything apply, so we can expect to find maybe a cold front on the periphery of that, maybe something like that. And that's what's going to develop towards Thursday or Friday in the Mississippi River Valley. So that should be pretty interesting right there. It looks like a couple strong troughs coming on shore here over the next week or two. So things ought to get really interesting here. Finally starting to feel like winter. And there we go. And that's the end of that model cycle. So that's what's going on there. And just very quickly, you can see the subtropical jet. You might want to look on the internet and do a little bit of research about that. Subtropical jet, we're going to be seeing that a lot more during the winter months, and that does become a weather maker, and that's associated with what we call the pineapple express. When we tap very, very moist tropical air, that's a very effective mechanism of bringing that up into the United States proper. Okay, I think I'm about done here. I'll just check over on chat and say hello to everybody. And looks like things are running pretty smooth here. I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you at the same time tomorrow night. Thanks.